And now it should work, or looks like the way it is supposed to look. Preparing to live stream. Just make sure now that I'm on the wrong account.
I think it's already live. I'm going to check.
Yes, it seems to be working. Okay, everybody. Nice to have everybody around. My name is Carsten Schradin. I'm at the CNRS in Strasbourg, France, and I'm the host for today. And it's a great pleasure that I can host Isabella today. But first, we want to quickly look back. Last week, we had a talk by Martin Kowalewski about exciting 30 years of long-term field studies on howler monkeys, a project mainly based on nature conservation. It's really great the work they're doing there in Argentina, following these monkeys in different habitats for so long, and then also getting interesting information on social behavior and social evolution. And next week, oh, that is still my stuff here. Next week we have Ellie Strauss, who will talk on exploring nepotistic societies with spotted hyenas, also something I'm very much looking forward to. But today we have something that's even more to my heart, which is parental care. And I'm very happy to have Isabella here, Isabella Capelini, to present to us. She's doing exciting comparative work on using very high accurate databases, which is rare in this kind of field where people often just try to use everything they find and not look for quality, but the quality of her databases are amazing. Isabella did her undergraduate studies actually in Milano in Italy. She is Italian, but then soon moved further north to the grey skies of the UK, doing a PhD in Newcastle. But as it was too grey, she still then studied African ungulates, working on life history and social traits in the hartebeest group of mammals. And she stayed in the UK doing then two postdocs, but at the same university, the University of Durham, first on the evolution of sleep, also focusing here on wild living animals and mammals, which is very difficult to get proper data there. And a second postdoc, which I quickly discussed with her in our meeting before, on female reproductive traits in mammals, so the evolution of placenta, which is something also very interesting. For example, when you think about parent-offspring conflict in utero, it's very important to understand this. But then afterwards, she became a lecturer at the University of Hull, but since 2019 she's in Belfast in Northern Ireland at Queen's University, and still focusing on these different aspects, like especially life history and how it relates to sleep ecology, also biological invasions, reproductive traits such as placenta, but also reproduction includes, or I'm studying parental care by different members with male, female, biparental care. And today she will be mainly focusing on this within amphibians, where there's interestingly a lot of more field data available than for mammals, as I found out when we discussed it. And I'm very much looking forward to your presentation, Isabella.
Thank you. So let me share. Okay. Hang on a second, I have something here. Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Carsten, for the invitation and for the introduction. So what I'm going to talk to you about is a project on amphibian parental care, and I'm particularly interested in the origin, the drivers, the maintenance, and the maintenance of parental care, but in particular on diversity. So why parental care in the first place? Well, parental care is central to the fitness of the parents and offspring, is covariant with life history traits, is also central to social evolution, and is part of cooperational conflict within the family, and is a precursor of sociality, and is related to mating system and sexual selection. And here I put some of the more recent paper that explored some of these aspects on parental care in diverse group of animals. So just to make it clear for everybody, what I consider parental care is any parental behavior or adaptation, so something like viviparity, that increases the fitness of the offspring and often at some cost to the carer. So in most of the study, particularly at large scale, comparative large scale, we tend to look at parental care in relation to the caring individual, so the sex of the animal that is caring, or their identity, the parent or some other helpers. So we look at caring sex. We also look at stage and duration of care, and variation is also present in care form. However, in many of the previous studies, most of the variation is really clamped into caring sex, and much less attention has been paid to the stage at which care happens and the form of care. And when I started the project, this for me was problematic, because we would expect from all we know in behavioral ecology that different form of parental care may entail different costs and therefore may also have different benefits. And when I started looking at this, actually, this is a project that comes out of my teaching. I was teaching diversity in amphibians in my vertebrate evolution module, and I was teaching a lot of things that I couldn't really find much evidence for when it was coming down to reproductive ecology and parental care in amphibians. And while teaching this, I thought actually amphibians are an excellent group to start looking at some of the questions on the origin and maintenance of parental care implication for life history evolution. And the reason is that are extremely diverse. So a question I'm asking in the talk today is, how does parental care evolve? What are its ecological drivers? And how does it relate to life histories? So amphibians present different form of care, like attendance that can happen at the egg stage, at the tadpole stage, or even at the juvenile stage. You can also have transport of tadpoles or juveniles by the parents. Typically, in the tadpole stage, the parents move the tadpoles from a small water body to a larger water body, or at the juvenile stage, they're actually carrying them around for a while. You can have feeding, and primarily in two forms, with eggs in frogs, where the eggs and tadpoles develop into small water bodies, and presumably because there isn't much for them to eat, females lay either egg or fertilized eggs. And in Sicilian, you have dermatophagy, so they eat the skin of a mother post-hatching. And then you have brooding that can happen at either the egg or the tadpole stage. So at the egg, here you see this very famous marsupial frog, where the eggs are carried on the back of the parents, sometimes are in between the hind legs, and in some species they are covered by parental skin. In other frog species, the tadpoles are actually retained in the stomach. The egg and the tadpole are retained in the stomach. They hatch, and the parents carry around the tadpoles in the stomach and mouth. And finally, you have viviparity. This is primarily present in salamanders and newts, and they can hatch as tadpoles or directly as juveniles. So all of this diversity, as you can see, happen at different stages, but you can also have variation between the sexes. So you have sex, either sex or both sexes doing egg attendance or tadpole attendance. Transport can be by the male or the female. Obviously, trophic egg feeding happens only with females, and brooding can again be by either parents. Okay, so we extracted data on this behavior from nearly 400 peer-reviewed sources for over 1,300 amphibian species that have no missing information for the care form and the stage of development, so egg, tadpole, or juvenile, at which care was provided, and the caring sex. And in comparative studies, the hardest part perhaps is defining the absence of care. And the reason is that when we extract this data, we only look at data from field studies, and amphibians are actually excellent. Primarily, you have field studies for parental care, but obviously people don't describe behaviors that they don't observe. So how do you discriminate between absence of evidence and evidence of absence? Considering also the majority of species probably are not caring. So my postdoc Andrew here looked at whether there was any evidence of the reproductive behavior and reproductive ecology of the species being studied. So he carried out a second search in Web of Science of reproductive ecology species by species. And if he did find that reproductive ecology was indeed studied, but parental care wasn't mentioned, then we took that this was evidence that parental care wasn't present. If instead the species hasn't been studied at all for reproductive ecology, that species has been eliminated from the database. So we ended up with this number of 1,322 species for parental care that were also in the phylogeny that we use for our comparative study. And here I show you how the data distribute across the phylogeny, and it's primarily to show you that the data is quite distributed across the tree. So the first thing that as a comparative biology, I worried about is whether my data are all clamped in one clade, and therefore I really have one independent origin. And looking at this, you can see the internal ring here is egg attendance, so it's quite common and distributed across all the tree. Egg brooding is far rarer. You have one major clade here of the marsupial frogs, but you have our evidence here of independent evolution. Here is the data for the tadpole stage. The most common is tadpole transport, but you have brooding and feeding all across the phylogeny. It's quite rare type of behaviors. And then juvenile care is happening rarer, and you have Sicilian here are the ones where you have the feeding and viviparity primarily, Sicilian and salamanders. Okay, so this is just to introduce the data because this will come all throughout the talk. So let's go on the question instead. So the first question I was asking in how does parental care diversity evolve? And I was particularly interested in three aspects: the more simple versus the more complex form of care, the duration of care, and the biparental care. So let's start in from the first question. When we look at parental care behavior, there are different type of, as I showed, different type of behaviors. And in the literature, there is the expectation that simpler behavior and simpler care forms evolve more easily and in fewer steps than more complex forms. So the simpler form is considered a precursor of more complex form and easy to evolve, which means if we translate that into a comparative framework, it evolves more quickly and is also presumably lost more quickly. Complex forms are harder to evolve because they may entail more change from the parents' point of view, but also because if we think about parental care, we may start having interaction between parents and offspring that may alter the evolutionary trajectory and the opportunity to be lost for a particular behavior. And I give you here the specific example. If we look at parental care in amphibians, egg attendance is considered a very simple behavior that should evolve very easily from the absence of care. And the reason is that what you do expect is that, or what is proposed is that the female lay the eggs and then she just sticks around to just recover from laying the eggs or whatever other reason. And In doing so, she starts guarding the eggs and protecting the eggs. And over time, the behavior becomes consolidated if it provides an evolutionary advantage. While more complex forms, like viviparity, require more complex adaptation, the eggs need to be retained, gas exchange has to be performed within the oviduct of the mother, and you may also have the potential for interaction between the mother and the offspring through release of hormones by the offspring, so the eggs or the tadpole within the maternal body. When I was thinking about this project, then, okay, we have these two extremes. Viviparity, we consider the complex form, parental care with egg attendance, the simple form. How do we class this other behavior? And to be honest, we didn't have any guidance on the literature on this behavior. They appear to be quite neglected. So we thought, okay, we let the data tell us how this behavior go in relation to the predictions. They could be considered relatively simple form like transport, but then brooding might be more similar to viviparity, for example. So the way we test this was using comparative methods that allows us to infer the rate of evolution. So how quickly a behavior is gained from the absence of a behavior and how quickly it is lost. And we expect that we had higher evolutionary rates of gain or loss for simpler behavior when compared to complex behavior. So we had this is a very simple graphical representation. So we have a simple form of care. We have a rapid acquisition of care for a simple behavior and a potentially rapid loss. When we compare that with a complex behavior, here I use the thickness of a arrow to indicate how quickly a behavior is acquired. And we expect that this arrow is thinner, so the rate of evolution is lower. And potentially there is no loss if the complexity of a behavior that triggers interaction between parent and offspring made the loss difficult if a offspring, for example, become dependent on parental care. So this method was implemented using multi-state, if you're familiar with that, in base traits, and the phylogeny was a molecular tree by Parental. These are the specific of a Bayesian modeling if you are interested in those, but essentially is a MCMC approach that we have used. And so this is what we got. So this is egg attendance, the evolutionary gain of egg attention, and you can see is much faster than any other of a behavior and adaptation like viviparity is here. So egg attendance faster than everything else, and all this behavior are practically performing in a similar manner. When we look at the loss of these behaviors, we see that egg attendance is here, and egg attendance, this is much faster rate of evolution. The number actually tells us the gain and loss of egg attendance is the same. We have faster rate of loss for some of the behaviors like juvenile transport, tadpole attendance, and tadpole feeding. But we have behaviors like egg brooding, tadpole brooding, and viviparity, where our model tells us in some cases, in some models, this is estimated to be 0. So we have between 16 and 21% of models indicating this behavior are not lost. So to answer this first question, is parental care easier to evolve than complex care? We found that egg attendance is acquired more easily than any other behavior from the absence of these behaviors. And we suggest that perhaps for the other behaviors, like in particular, I'm thinking tadpole attendance is still attendance, or juvenile attendance. Maybe the ecological and social opportunities are the reason why we don't see for this behavior as high rate of evolution as we do for egg attendance. At the same time, complex form like viviparity, brooding, and even transport may become harder to lose So the rate of loss was more conform in our prediction, presumably because we may have more interaction between parents and offspring. And when I was looking at this behavior, for example, in the case of tadpole transport, there are frogs where the parents don't take all the tadpoles in a pool, but only one or two, and the rest are abandoned. And the tadpoles compete to go on the back of a parent, and they beg to go on the back of a parent, and the parent chooses which one to take. When you look at tadpole feeding, you also see interaction of this nature are described between parents and offspring. So maybe this ecological opportunity and interaction between parents and offspring are the reason why the rate of evolution don't perfectly match our predictions. But in general, egg attendance is a behavior that is evolving quickly and is lost very quickly. So the second question we ask is, how does parental care evolve in terms of duration? Is prolonged care gained in steps, and is it more difficult to lose once it has evolved? So prolonged care should be more costly just because by providing for longer, the parents invest more resources into the offspring. It may also allow more interaction between parents and offspring over time, and therefore more opportunity for the offspring to manipulate parental behavior, either by communication. And as I said earlier, the offspring, the tadpoles, do communicate with the parents in several forms. They, for example, move a tail in water to solicit maternal responses, in particular release of trophic eggs, or they also have vocalization. And the parental longer duration of care may also make the offspring more dependent on the parents for survival. So longer care should be harder to lose once it has evolved. So if we think about our data, what I was considering, duration of care was the evolution of juvenile and tadpole care from egg care. And one advantage of modern phylogenetic comparative methods is that we can also test whether a combination of traits is evolutionary, I say stable in this case, mimicking in some ways game theoretic models. So whether a behavior that is acquired is gained more quickly than it is lost. So we translate this into a diagram using, again, rate of evolution. We have combination of different form of care. So in amphibian, we have the majority not present in any form of care. Very few have late only care, and these are particularly species that have tadpole transport and tadpole feeding. The majority have early only care, like egg attendance, and some species have both early care, egg stage, and late care, so juvenile and transport. So our prediction was that from the absence of care, we should see early care, so egg attendance, with high rate of loss, but we also have the possibility of having prolonged care. And we expect that the loss of prolonged care is harder, so the rate of gain is greater than the rate of loss. And what I was wondering, how on earth do we get here? I expected that perhaps from prolonged care, these species that have tadpole only care have lost the egg attendance stage, and presumably this is not a very stable stage. Maybe you go back to having prolonged care and possibly lose it. But I didn't expect to have evolution of late care directly from the absence of care. When we tested this, we use a two-step set of analysis. First of all, we ask whether early care and late care are evolutionary correlated. And so some evidence that early care is associated with the presence of late care. And then if so, do we see this pattern where we have from no care, more likely the evolution of early care and then prolonged care. And with a prolonged care is evolutionary stable, so the rate of gains are higher than the rate of loss. So what did it find? Here is just in this phylogeny, we color-coded early care in blue, late care in red, and this is a mirror tree, so you can see that early care is far more common, and it seems to be more or less matched with the presence of late care. And when we tested this, we found strong evidence that the two are evolutionary correlated. So we look at the evolutionary associations, and this is what we found. From the absence of care, we found that you do get the evolution of egg attendance, and you have equal rate of loss, so gain and loss of egg attendance, which is sort of similar to what we showed earlier for simpler care. We expected this. Egg attendance is gain and loss very quickly. But unexpectedly, we also find you may evolve late-only care, but this is rapidly lost. From egg attendance and from late-only care, we have evolution of prolonged care. But we also find that prolonged care can be as easily lost as it is gained from egg attendance, or can be lost to late care. So we find some support for what we expected, but also some unexpected findings. So prolonged care is not evolutionary stable. You can still lose it. When we repeated the analysis sex by sex, so we found the exact same result if we are looking at female-only care or male-only care. And when we split by behavior, then we use a similar approach, but instead of using parental care, we were looking at individual behavior. We found that egg attendance promotes the evolution of tadpole attendance, tadpole transport, and juvenile care. And here I clamped on the juvenile behavior because otherwise the sample sizes were too small. So what does this mean? We suggest that egg attendance can be easily gained and lost. But as you get prolonged care, you may have some manipulation of the offspring in relation of a parental behavior, but you still have the opportunity of losing late care behavior, which we didn't expect to see as much as we do instead in the data. So does parental care evolve in steps? Yes, we found evidence of that. We found that egg attendance promotes the acquisition of care at later stages in both sexes, but later care form can be as easily lost as they are gained. We suggest that perhaps a type of behavior may also determine to what extent this behavior are lost. Okay, so the third question then we ask is, how does biparental care evolve, and is it evolutionary stable when we have division of labor? So theoretical models tell us that because of conflict between the sexes, biparental care should be evolutionary unstable. So once it is evolved, it should be lost relatively easily because of desertion by one sex. But if you have division of labor, then this could make biparental care evolutionary stable. So once it is gained, it should be persistent over substantial evolutionary time and lost at lower frequency. And in amphibians, we can test this because we have cases where we have parents doing exactly the same behavior, like here, this male and female frog do tadpole transport, but you also have the same for tadpole attendance. But you have species where you have the male doing tadpole transport, the female doing tadpole feeding, for example. So here you see our male and female care behaviors plotted on the phylogeny. And one other reason we found that potentially can explain the evolution of parental care is that the sexes may have different drivers. So we may find that depending on whatever driver is underpinning this, we may find division of labor making this evolutionary stable or not. So when we look at the evolution of biparental care without looking at whether there is division of labor or not, we found that either male or female care can evolve from no care at practically equal rate. From uniparental care by either sex, we have evolution of biparental care, But then biparental care is evolutionary unstable. The rate of loss is very high, both towards female-only care and male-only care. When we look at behavior for which we have sufficient sample sizes to do this, we look at biparental care in egg attendance. We find exactly the same pattern. Biparental care is lost to parental care in egg attendance to both male and female. We look at tadpole transfer. We found more or less the same picture in the sense that in this case, biparental care is unstable, but we have male tadpole transport promoting the evolution of female tadpole transport, but then we have some rate of loss here. Some models here indicate some 0 towards male, but the loss is towards female-only tadpole transport. And there is not much of evolution of female tadpole transfer from no care. This rate is very low, and much of it is estimated to be 0. So, but in the general pattern is essentially biparental tadpole transport is evolutionary unstable. You go from no care to male, biparental, and then female. Okay, how about division of labor? So we reclassify our data and we consider overlapping care when we have the exact same behavior at the exact same stage. Complementary care when we have different behavior performed by the parents at the same stage, or the same behavior performed by the different parents at different stages. So we may have egg attendance by one sex and tadpole attendance by the other sex. And then no biparental care, we had uniparental and no caring species clumped together here. So when we look at the results, what we found is that from the absence of biparental care, we may have both, the prediction here was that we may have evolution of either of this, but then the overlapping care, so the same behavior, is evolutionary unstable and should be lost. On the other hand, the division of labor should make this system stable, and so we shouldn't see losses of division biparental by division of labor back to no parental care, biparental care. And the overlapping care may also evolve division of labor, but we didn't expect the opposite, from division of labor to overlapping care. So when we tested this, what we found was that but from the absence of biparental care, we may have either division of labor or overlapping parental care duties, but both were rapidly lost to the absence of biparental care, so either uniparental care or no care. And then between the two, there is some rate of evolution where from overlapping care, you're more likely to go on division of labor, but really the evolutionary main trajectory is towards the loss of this form of parental care. So what we concluded for biparental care is that care by one sex promotes the evolution of care by the other sex from the first set of analysis, but biparental care in amphibians is evolutionary unstable, even with division of labor. In our system, perhaps evolution of biparental care maybe evolutionary stable by having low offspring survival with uniparental care, or maybe limited opportunity for parents that are deserting to find other mates. But we didn't find evidence for this in amphibians. So for this first paper, our main findings were simple egg attendance evolved more easily than more complex form of care and promotes care at later stages, but care at later stages can be lost. We suggest that the type of care may help explain why there are lower rate of acquisition of late care behaviors. And we found that biparental care is evolutionary unstable with or without division of labor. The second question I wanted to ask is, what are the ecological drivers of parental care? So much, this is rarely studied in parental care, in parental care research, and much of what you find is the use of species that have plasticity in the expression of care, that are used to investigate what drivers may facilitate the maintenance of the presence of parental care as opposed to the absence of parental care. However, one issue here is that plasticity may not necessarily reflect the evolutionary condition that promoted the evolutionary origin of parental care. So a comparative approach here can be quite helpful. And if we look at amphibians, there are several potential ecological drivers in reproductive ecology that have been suggested as facilitating the evolution of parental care in this group. So, oops. Sorry, I just told you this and I forgot I had it on this slide. Okay, so if we look at amphibians, egg attendance is considered the simplest form and is the most common. There is a lot of evidence that egg attendance increases survival of eggs against several threats. Predation is one, but also dehydration and diseases, for example, due to various set of parasites. We showed you that amphibian parental care promotes the evolution of later form of care and is present in both sexes. So what determines the evolution of behavior? It's a good behavior to start looking at. We found 3 potential hypotheses that relate the evolution of egg attendance to reproductive ecology, but also 3 counter hypotheses that actually promote reverse causation, where parental care is the consequence, not the cause of the relationship with this reproductive ecology behavior. And I'll cover that now. So just a little bit on the data, we had a smaller data set, a slightly smaller data set than the one I showed you before, because it was limited by these 3 reproductive ecology traits. Terrestrial eggs, whether the eggs are laid in terrestrial environment or aquatic environment. And here by aquatic, I really mean in water. Also, another trait we looked at was whether the eggs were hidden or exposed, and whether the eggs led to direct development or not. So in some frogs and in salamanders, you may have the hatching directly at juvenile with the tadpole stage occurring during the egg phase. Okay, so the first hypothesis relate parental care and egg attendance in particular with terrestrial reproduction. So terrestrial egg development has been proposed to be a way to escape high predation risk in aquatic environment. And it also could be good for the eggs because there is more oxygen availability on land than there is in water. But in new terrestrial environment, there are new challenges, dehydration, new predator, new pathogens. So according to this hypothesis, then you have terrestrial egg development that promotes the evolution of egg attendance to overcome these new mortality risks. However, egg attendance could also evolve in aquatic environment, and this is the opposing hypothesis. And this should be to protect exactly against those numerous predators in an aquatic environment. And then this might facilitate then the transition to a terrestrial environment with new challenges. So in this hypothesis, the causation is reversed. And then you have, when we were looking at this earlier, we had male and female egg attendance occurring in some part of the trees, but not others. So one possibility is actually that we have different evolutionary trajectories in different sexes. So for this analysis, we look at egg attendance by males and egg attendance by females. So what we predicted is that if we have terrestrial egg first, then we should have high rate of evolution from no care in aquatic environment to terrestrial eggs without care, and then from this, the combination of two, terrestrial egg and egg attendance. And of course, we expected some losses, but we expect that this could be evolutionary stable, so maintained condition. For the reverse causation hypothesis, or care first, we expected the high rate of evolution is from aquatic eggs with no care to aquatic eggs with egg attendance, and this facilitates the transition to terrestrial environment. And again, we use the same approach as we did before with NMCMC models in base traits. So here, just to look at the data plotted on the phylogeny, we have terrestrial eggs and female egg attendance, and terrestrial eggs and male egg attendance. So our first test was whether these two are evolutionary correlated, and we found strong evidence that they are. So we look at the evolutionary trajectories, and we found that from a condition of aquatic eggs without care, we have evolution of terrestrial egg first. This transition rate of aquatic eggs with egg attendance was returned to be 0, so this doesn't happen. And then we have evolution of egg attendance with terrestrial eggs. We have some losses. We unexpectedly found that egg attendance again can be lost at relatively high rate. So essentially having terrestrial egg and egg attendance doesn't make egg attendance to be persistent over evolutionary time. So it doesn't make it an evolutionary stable condition. So this is in females. When we look at males, we couldn't really discriminate an evolutionary pathway, primarily because these numbers are pretty similar. So here I put the means, but if you look at variation of these evolutionary rates, they estimate overlap substantially. So we couldn't really conclude that these rates are different. So in males, we don't have a clear evolutionary pathway. So we propose that one reason for that could be because there may be a third variable we need to consider. For example, the type of water bodies. Maybe in some condition we may have evolution of egg attendance in aquatic environment, and maybe in others we have first terrestrial eggs without care. Okay, so when we look at the second potential predictor is hiding the eggs. So hiding the eggs should promote egg survival from predators and potentially also from dehydration. And because of this, the parents may then be able to also reduce their own predation risk. So when the parents are caring for the offspring, for the eggs may pose themselves under risk. So this hypothesis suggests that the evolving hiding the eggs promote the evolution of parental care, so egg attendance, by reducing predation risk on the parents as well as the eggs. But we may also have high predation risk on parents that are caring that determines the evolution of hiding the eggs. So we have first the evolution of egg attendance, of exposed eggs, and then because high predation risk of this condition, then we may have evolution of parental care and hiding the eggs. So hiding the eggs is the consequence, not the consequence, not the cause of the evolution of parental care. But we also suggested that perhaps these are two alternative solutions to enhance egg survival. So in some species you have hiding the eggs without care, and in other species you have care without hidden eggs, so in exposed eggs. So two alternative conditions. So how do we discriminate between these three hypotheses using our system? If we have hiding the eggs first, we expect the evolutionary rate of hiding the eggs without care to be higher than egg attendance from no care, and then from the condition of hiding the eggs, we expect high rate of evolution of egg attendance. If we have care first, we expect the opposite, so egg attendance evolve with exposed eggs and then promote the evolution of hiding the eggs. If there are two alternative conditions, then we expect these two rates to be high and equal, but at the same time, this condition here to be reversed. So this combination of hiding the eggs and egg attendance to be unstable and promoting hidden eggs with no care, or exposed egg with egg attendance. So when we look at the data plotting on the phylogeny, here we have female egg attendance and hiding eggs. Here we have male egg attendance and hiding eggs, and we found that for both sexes, these traits are evolutionarily associated. When we look at the evolutionary trajectory, we found that hiding the eggs evolves at much faster rate of evolution without care than egg attendance on exposed eggs. And then from here, we have evolution from this condition of hiding eggs without care, we have evolution of egg attendance. But we also have some reversal back, so we lose egg attendance. So again, hiding the eggs doesn't make the combination doesn't make egg attendance an evolutionary stable condition. And the final trait we looked at is direct development. So direct memories hatching directly as juvenile. Because of this, these eggs are highly valuable for females. They are typically large and laid in small clutches. And so they are of high fitness value for females. So because they expose the parents to longer investment and predation risk, we've expected that direct development might promote the evolution of parental care, particularly in females. But at the same time, again, we can have a reverse causation where parental protection from predator and external sources may then facilitate further investment into the eggs, and so we have evolution of direct development as a consequence, rather than being the driver of the evolution of parental care. So when we look at the evolutionary association between female egg attendance and direct development, we found strong evidence that the two are evolutionarily associated. But when we look at males and direct development, we found that in fact they are not. Very strong evidence that direct development and male egg attendance are not evolutionarily associated, very independent. So we only look at the evolutionary pathway for females. And what we found is that we have evolution of direct development and egg attendance from the absence of both traits to be equal. But then from direct development, we have a high rate of evolution of acquisition of egg attendance, while this rate is lower. So we concluded that direct development is a driver for the evolution of egg attendance. So what we concluded from these studies on the reproductive ecology drivers is that they do promote the evolution of egg attendance, particularly in female. We found strong evidence that terrestrial eggs promote the evolution of female egg attendance. We have no clarity on the direction of evolution for male egg attendance. Hidden eggs promote the evolution of egg attendance in both sexes, and direct development promotes the evolution of egg attendance, but only in females. What we found is that while these are drivers for the evolution of egg attendance, none of this makes egg attendance evolutionary stable. So when we look back at what I've shown you so far, egg attendance is the simpler form of care. It can evolve rapidly in both sexes. It can be lost rapidly in both sexes, and there is no situation, no ecological condition where egg attendance that we found is evolutionary maintained. So when I was talking earlier about potential opportunities for egg attendance and other traits to be maintained, depending on ecology, then we found that none of this actually make egg attendance evolutionary persistent. Okay, so the final question that we asked was whether how parental care relates to life history strategy. And in particular, I was interested in diversity of parental care form and the egg size, egg number trade-off. So in favorable environment, we would expect the evolution of larger eggs. And this should happen in situations where we have low predation risk, for example, a stable competitive environment, and in amphibian and fish, terrestrial habitats are supposed to promote the evolution of larger eggs. Parental care is also considered a driver of evolution of larger eggs because of the defense of the offspring, defense of the eggs against predations of a safe harbor hypothesis or in favor of ephemeral habitats. And this question, the relationship between terrestrial eggs and parental care with larger eggs has been studied before. But it has held contradictory studies, and I think because previous studies ignore quite a few issues. The first one is that none of these studies look at the trade-off with clutch size. And this is important because it might well be that it is clutch size that is under selection and not egg attendance per se. They also didn't consider allometry. And this is problematic because in amphibians, larger eggs are found in species that are larger, where females are larger, and clutch sizes are also larger. They also conflated all types of parental care together, and it might well be that only some form of care are associated with larger eggs. They conflated care in sex and the stage at which care was provided. And these studies either look at parental care without considering other aspects of the reproductive ecology of this species, like the presence of terrestrial eggs or the presence of direct development. So all of this may be reasons why previous study found different association between egg size and terrestrial eggs and parental care. So in this case, we switched to a new set of models that are called variable rates. So if you are familiar with comparative methods, you would probably look at PGLS models or phylogenetic generalized least square model. If you're not familiar, what we are essentially looking at is simple, let's say, complex multi-progression models that also account for phylogeny. But what variable rates do is that they also look at the rate of evolution of individual branches of your dependent variable. So they can identify branches in the tree where the rate of change in your variable has been particularly high. And this is useful because we know that selection should lead to higher rate of phenotypic change in a particular species. So if we think about these models, what we are essentially saying is that if we have a longer branch here representing high rate of evolution, then we can pinpoint that to the potential driver. So the way this works is that we test a model without the presence of parental care. We identify where these branches of high phenotypic change occur. And then we test a second model where we now include parental care. And we see how many branches this additional model can explain. So if parental care is the driver of these changes, we should expect many fewer branches with high rate of evolution because those are explained by the presence of parental care. Okay, so when we look at our predictions, then we expected that egg size is traded off with clutch size. And we also expect egg size to be larger in species that are larger in body size, in species that have terrestrial reproduction, so terrestrial eggs, terrestrial tadpoles, but also in species with parental care. So here we tested each parental care behavior, so we throw them all in as predictor in our model, although I clamped it here because there are too many to say. And we didn't find anything in the literature to tell us which parental care behavior should have larger eggs and which should not. So our expectation is that all forms of parental care are associated with larger eggs. And then we expect direct development to be associated with larger eggs too. Okay, so what did we find? So we found that, okay, so let me explain here. Here we have again an MCMC approach. So these are posterior estimates. This line is the line of 0. So on the left here, we have negative effect. On the right here, we have positive effect. So we see that clutch sizes shows a negative effect. So egg size is traded off against clutch size, which is what we expected. We also find that so direct development is associated with larger eggs. Terrestrial eggs are also larger. Male egg attendance, female egg attendance, and egg brooding are also associated with larger eggs. And instead, female tadpole attendance and tadpole feeding are associated with smaller eggs. So this first part of the output of a model tells us the direction of association, and we find that direct development is associated with eggs that are 39% larger. Brooding is 57% larger, but tadpole feeding smaller. And we suggested that one reason why tadpole feeding might be associated with smaller eggs is because the female is coming back again and again and again. And it's a little bit like what people found for viviparity in guppies, where these species have very small eggs. And the reason is because the mother is continually providing food. So she doesn't need to produce a larger eggs in the first place. And we suggest this might be analogous system. Then we look at the branches. So we compare our model with what we should expect without egg attendance, without all the behaviors that are significant predictors and terrestrial eggs and direct development. So we have a few branches here with high rate of evolution, but we found that our model explained only 3 of these 19 branches with higher rate of evolution. So when we look at then clutch size, so for egg size, we then have terrestrial egg and direct development produce larger eggs. Care forms, only some of them are associated with larger eggs, some are not. And they differ between different stages. So this in part support the safe harbor hypothesis, where larger eggs are associated with some form of parental care. Continuous nutrition for tadpole feeding I've already mentioned. And we suggest that tadpole attendance may be potentially associated with small eggs because they are favorable environment for post-hatching survival. Okay, so when we look at clutch size, we expected again larger clutches with smaller eggs and vice versa, but we also expected that clutch sizes is larger in larger species, and then they are smaller in with terrestrial reproduction, parental care, and direct development. When we look at the results, we found that larger size is associated with more eggs, and then we have a trade-off with egg size, all of which we expected. Direct development is associated with smaller clutches. Terrestrial eggs and terrestrial larvae are associated with smaller clutches. And all forms of parental care that are significant in our model, egg brooding, male tadpole attendance, male tadpole survival, and tadpole feeding are all associated with substantial reduction in clutch size. And these are our effect sizes translated as percentage. They're all over 50%. When we look at the rate, branches that are showing high rate of evolution, this is the model without our significant predictor for terrestrial eggs and parental care forms and direct development. And you can see a substantial reduction. So we have 108 of 135 stretch branches that have high rate of evolution are explained by our ecological and parental care forms. So 80% of the branches are under selection for clutch size, our drivers can explain. So smaller clutches with terrestrial egg, larvae, direct development, egg brooding, tadpole feeding, male tadpole starboard, and attendance. These are explained by, with many high rate of evolution explained by our predictors. And the suggestion we have is that this relates to, for example, oxygen diffusion in terrestrial eggs is compromised, so that it might explain why we have smaller clutches above and beyond the trade-off with egg size. And this is particularly the case for direct developing species. Tadpole feeding might be energetically expensive. There is evidence that female strawberry poison frogs that are providing for more than one tadpole, they lay the tadpoles in individual water bodies. They reduce the clutch size when they provide for more tadpoles. And physical space may be the reason why clutch size is smaller in brooding species. So there is limited space on the body or inside the body for brooding species and species that provide tadpoles transport, or in nests and burrows. So oxygen limitation and space might be the reason why clutch size is reduced above and beyond the trade-off with egg size. When we look at all our data, all our results for egg size and clutch size, then we can also note that there are predictors that affect both egg size and clutch size in the expected direction. So we have larger eggs and smaller clutches with terrestrial eggs, egg brooding, and direct development. We have, however, predictors that only affect clutch size, like terrestrial eggs and male tadpole transport, that reduce clutch size. We have predictors like attendance that have opposite effect depending on which stage they are provided. So egg attendance increase egg size, but female tadpole attendance decrease egg size. And then we have predictors like tadpole feeding that have unpredicted effects on egg size being reduced and clutch size being reduced. So we suggest that while we find evidence that that parental care affect the trade-off between clutch size and egg size, we find only some of all our behaviors are conforming theoretical predictions, some are not. And so this depends on the type of behavior, the care in sex, and the stage at which care is provided. And some of the reason we think that previous studies were contradictory is because they failed to control for clutch size, but we found strong evidence is really under strong selection, much stronger selection than it is egg size in amphibians. Okay, so to bring everything together with these studies, what we were really showing is that diversity of care, diversity of parental care matters. So we need to consider care in terms of which behavior, by which sex, and at which stage. And if we do so, we may find unexpected results in relation to what theoretical predictions are. And we expect that we may find similar results in our groups of species that have high diversity of parental care, like, for example, fish or insects. And finally, I want to thank my postdoc, Andrew, that did all of this work, and my collaborator, Chris Venditti, that helped with several of the analysis, and then as a bunch of people who really helped and advised on the project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isabella, for a fascinating talk with lots of data and information on this huge biodiversity of care systems, clutch size, egg size in amphibians. Before we start the discussion, as I know many people might have to leave or already left, just to mention again, next week we talk about exploring nepotistic societies and spotted hyenas, a talk by Ellie Strauss from the Max Planck Institute for Animal Behavior in Germany. So please come and join us then. And now we still have some time for questions. And like always, when you have a question, just type a question mark into the chat. If you're a student, you can put an S behind your question mark. We treat students preferably. And we will try now today follow-up questions. If you have a question that directly is related to the question of the person before you, you can make a FU into it and I will try if I can cognitively manage with all these different options. Yeah. Okay. So if I had a lot of questions, but then the talk was so well organized today, were often answered afterwards. If nobody else has a question yet, I will start with one that's more off topic, and so that's why you didn't answer it in your talk later. I was quite interested by this feeding of the young in the Sicilians that has evolved there.
Yeah.
Do you know, has there been any study on the physiological mechanisms of this, especially if this is related to prolactin, like is any other taxa feeding of young fish, mammals, and birds?
I don't recall, but I can check for you. It's a while that I checked this literature. I don't remember prolactin being mentioned. It might be, but I don't recall.
Okay, it was just because, I mean, prolactin is for the discus milk in fish, for the
Yeah.
secretion in parrots and in ringdoves, and of course in mammals. It is quite
To
interesting.
be honest, what I remember is primarily description of the behavior and not much more
Yes.
than that. But I might have forgotten something.
It's difficult to measure because it's species specific in amphibians. We don't have antibodies,
Yeah,
but maybe there's some new work which I'm not aware of. I stopped working.
Sicilians are the most understudied of all amphibians. They are very, very hard to find and very hard to keep in the lab. So I guess that might be one reason why we don't know very much about them.
Okay. Thank you. Then we have a question by a student at the Succulent Coral Research Station. And if you can quickly introduce yourself with your name and what you're working on.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. My name is Nkululeko Nyao. I work here at the SKRS as a station manager and also doing two projects, large ecology and the sociality with the ectoparasites. So I would first like to compliment on your nice presentation. It was very, very nice and looked very, very smart. So I have two questions for you. The first question is basically based on the biparental care. So yes. So I want to ask that, are there any because you already said that the biparental care is unstable. So I want to ask a question that, are there any ecological explanation that might lead to that? Like why the biparental care is unstable? And secondly, can you conclude that all amphibians are biparental unstable, or you were based on your sample size, something like that?
Okay, so first question on the stability of parental care. The theoretical model that we found for parental care, they always indicate it is unstable because of the conflict between the sexes of how much care to provide. So once biparental care evolved, this model reasoned, well, I just ditch care to the other parent, and then at some stage I leave. So those are the theoretical models. This conflict between the sexes, you're better off leaving the other parent caring and you go and find another mate.
Okay.
I haven't found any theoretical model that predicts an ecological condition, but in terms of behavioral study, what you find is that there are studies in particular study system, particular species, where the idea is that biparental care may be important for survival of the offspring. So in particularly harsh environment, for example, then you may have a requirement of having both parents because they can't provide for the offspring or defend the offspring if they are only cared by one parent. But the theoretical models, and this is what I was referring to, they have all focused on the conflict between the sexes. There isn't a theoretical model that look at the ecology. The ecology is coming more from behavioral ecology study on single species. Okay, so that was your stability question. The sample sizes. To be honest, biparental care is relatively rare in amphibians. So I tested it just because I have it and I wanted to have a look at what happens in amphibians. But obviously it's not the group that has the most. So it might well be that if you test these models in maybe mammals and birds, then you find something different. So in birds, obviously the majority of birds are biparental. But you also have a much richer information on the birds because you have a duration of care, the plasticity of care. In amphibians, we don't have that much of information. We know very well about the behaviors, if they are happening or not happening in the wild, but we don't know much more. In birds, you have much more information, and to be honest, both biparental care and sexual conflict theoretical models are primarily based and created for birds. So that is where they try to explain the stability or the plasticity of care. So yeah,
Okay,
sample size isn't great for the amphibians.
okay, thank you very much, Isabel.
No worry, but that's what I was saying, in amphibians, we found it is not evolutionary stable. In our groups, you may find something completely different. And that will probably be my guess. Because to be honest, every time we look for universal rule, biology tells us that there aren't that many, really.
Thank you.
Okay, I have one question to your first study, but before I ask this, I have to consider it with your second study. I'm not understanding something there. In your first study, you showed that simple forms of care evolve more easily, also get lost more easily, while complex forms of care evolve more difficulty, but are less easily lost. But in your second study of evolutionary transitions, it seemed like that complex care can be easily lost. Or did I misunderstand
The
something
second
there?
study you miss, hang on. The second study you mean the duration of care?
Oh, I don't remember this. But you had these evolutionary transitions from simple care to complex care, but then you found that once complex care has evolved, it can also quite often disappear again. Is this in contrast to your first study, or how do you
No, I think it depends
together?
on the care. So when we were looking at the duration of care, we were looking at specific behavior or they all combine it depending on stage. So we found that egg attendance promote some particular behavior at later stage, but those behavior, like say tadpole transport, can also be easily lost. So those match with the complexity where the acquisition is rare of tadpole transport. And I think I could have made it clearer. It's probably the reason why it's not very common is because it depends on the evolution of egg attendance first, and then you may have tadpole transport, but then it can also be lost rapidly. So the loss is more conforming for the complex care. So in terms of viviparity brooding, those are are the ones that really show some transition rates being zero, the loss being zero, the models where we have the lowest transition rates.
So when you maintain that the complex care, I mean, I take the liberty to share this screen here. You had this here at the beginning of your talk. So the
Yeah,
complex one is less likely to lose. Now, of course, I was wondering whether there's a methodological problem like of these complex ones when you have here one species, one species, one species, one species. when you look at evolutionary history, the one species with complex care that got extinct, you of course cannot have in your analysis. So
Yeah.
it is possible that it gets lost much more often than you assume, because if it was just one species, you will never be able to have this in your data, or do I understand this wrong? So is
No,
extinction?
I think you're right. I think for behavior, there isn't much you can do. It doesn't fossilize. So the only thing we can do is study what we have in the current species. But yeah, you're right. You know, behavior doesn't fossilize. It
Yes.
might well be that some form of care are not consistent with predictions simply because we miss the fossils.
Yeah. Is there, in your studies, is there any evolution of simple or complex care that you think led to rapid speciation in this clade? So that's something that's really very successful, and then this species became much more diverse, like in the Dendrobatidae or something like this?
I don't know. I haven't looked at that question on speciation and diversification in particular. I think there are. My current student is looking at extinction, although extinction really what we are talking about is current extinction. So my suspicion is that parental care might be able to buffer against the risk of extinction because it protects the clutch from external sources. Does it facilitate speciation? Maybe egg attendance does. Maybe egg attendance could be a driver of speciation because it's like it could be terrestrial reproduction.
I mean,
They are protecting against mortality threats and might facilitate speciation. Maybe.
yeah, of course, the
Haven't
question is how
tested yet.
long. The question is how long in evolutionary time does it protect?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I know in mammals it's often regarded like cooperative breeding is the highlight of evolution, but sometimes I wonder whether it's also an evolutionary dead end, and that's why so few mammal species actually show cooperative breeding. It might be look great for us, but on an evolutionary timescale, maybe most of these species become extinct. Can you say anything about the evolutionary timescale in the trees you have been showing? So, do we have an idea whether amphibians showed egg attendance already since 350 million years? Or is there anything
Yeah,
one can say?
I haven't looked at that in that detail, so I haven't checked when exactly. Let me see. Let me have a look at the tree. I wanted to have a look. Hang on a second. If I don't, to be honest, Carsten, I don't remember the branch lengths here and where we have the evolution of those behaviors in particular. But you have attendance evolving more deeply in the tree of salamanders and newts than you do in the frogs. So in the frogs are relatively more recent, both male and females. But the times, I haven't looked at those in particular.
Okay.
I can have a look if you want.
It's interesting. I didn't know whether one is allowed to read it from the trees or not, and whether this is to scale to anything or not. Because I mean, it's interesting to know when did it evolve in birds and mammals. It's regarded as be something so great, but I mean, at least lactation in mammals is nearly 200 million years old, so it's not so new. And I would guess egg attendance should also possibly have evolved quite early. Great. There's no questions on YouTube, and then I mean here a few people are left also because there was somebody who had a question earlier, but then I told him he has to wait. SO, and that person he already left, but I can still read it. He sent it in a private message. He writes, C. O'Donnell, he's not here anymore, whether there's evidence for total loss from prolonged care, in other words, prolonged going to egg attendance and then on to no care in a later. But I mean, I think that you care, that probably it came also later in your in your talk already that there is this loss does occur.
Yeah. I mean, once you have a loss, once you go back to egg attendance, when the probability of losing care altogether is as much as you have care. So yes, there is evidence that if you lose prolonged care back to egg attendance, then you're equally likely to lose egg attendance as well.
Okay. Great. Then I would like to thank you once more it was really fascinating, and I'm for sure will go back to read some of your papers, and it's
Thank you.
amazing to see this diversity in amphibians. I'm